In March 2025, human remains were discovered in Plymouth, Massachusetts. A skull was located in the woods near Route 3, and state police began a search of the surrounding area. The find marked the first in a series of separate incidents across New England that became the focus of both official investigations and public speculation. Over the following months, additional cases appeared. In April, a body was recovered from the Connecticut River near Rocky Hill and later identified as 72-year-old Mary Colasanto, who had been missing since March. In June, 21-year-old Adriana Suazo was found in a wooded strip in Milton, Massachusetts. In August, police responded to reports of a body on Revere Beach, though that report turned out to be a blanket. Around the same time in Union, Maine, Sunshine Stewart was killed, and a 17-year-old suspect was charged with murder. These events occurred in different locations, involved different circumstances, and were handled by different investigative teams. However, online discussion began to group them together under a single theme. Posts claimed that a serial killer was moving across the region, and numbers were attached to headlines to create a running count of victims. By midsummer, phrases such as 13 bodies and serial killer in New England were widely circulated. Law enforcement agencies did not support these claims. The Massachusetts State Police stated publicly that there was no evidence linking the cases into a single series. Criminologists explained that while several deaths occurred in the same general time frame, the available facts showed differences in victim profiles, discovery sites, and investigative findings. Families of the deceased also asked the public to focus on factual updates instead of speculation. This script presents each case as it was reported, with emphasis on dates, locations, and the responses from authorities. The goal is to provide clarity by placing each incident in order and explaining what is known. It also examines how speculation spread online and why officials stressed caution in drawing connections between unrelated events. The structure follows a straightforward sequence. First, the discovery in Plymouth is reviewed, followed by the recovery and identification of Mary Colasanto in Connecticut. Next is the case of Adriana Suazo in Milton. Then the Revere Beach incident that highlighted how rumors can spread without verification. After that, the confirmed homicide of Sunshine Stewart in Maine is discussed, along with the arrest of a juvenile suspect. Finally, the wider response from police and experts is summarized, including explanations of why the serial killer theory is not supported by evidence. By approaching the subject in this way, the narrative avoids speculation and focuses on direct information. Each person involved is acknowledged individually, and each investigation is described in its own context. This method ensures that the focus remains on facts rather than fear, and on truth rather than rumor. The following sections will continue case by case, with attention to details released by investigators and statements made publicly. The record shows that while multiple deaths and recoveries occurred in New England during 2025, the idea of a single offender responsible for all of them is not supported by evidence. The Plymouth Skull Discovery. On March 6, 2025, a skull was discovered in a wooded area near Route 3 in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The location was a patch of land often used by hunters and people hiking in the spring season. The discovery was made by a hunter who immediately notified local authorities. Police arrived, secured the scene, and contacted the Massachusetts State Police. The area was then closed off so a search team could return with equipment and specialists to examine the site more thoroughly. The remains were described as a skull, with no other details released at the time. Investigators stressed that any determination regarding identity or cause of death would require forensic analysis. The first priority was to recover the skull carefully and to search the surrounding area for any additional remains, personal items, or evidence that could help explain how the skull came to rest in the woods. State police, local detectives, and members of the district attorney's office were all involved in the recovery. The site itself was close to Route 3, a major highway that runs through southeastern Massachusetts. Because of the location, investigators considered several possibilities. A body might have been left intentionally in the woods, a person could have wandered off and died from exposure, or remains could have been moved there after some other incident. No conclusion was announced in the early days. The official line from investigators was that the scene required a careful, methodical review before any statements could be made about what happened. In cases like this, the work of the medical examiner is central. The skull was transported to the Massachusetts office of the chief medical examiner. Specialists in forensic anthropology would be tasked with examining bone structure, looking for signs of trauma, and comparing the remains to dental records or DNA samples from families with missing relatives. Until those steps are completed, law enforcement cannot confirm an identity. At the same time, families of missing people in the region began following news of the discovery closely. Plymouth County, along with surrounding areas, has had open missing person cases stretching back years. For those families, each new report of unidentified remains brings both hope and fear. Hope that answers may finally come, and fear that the answer will confirm a devastating loss. In the wake of the Plymouth discovery, some families reached out to the media, asking for updates and expressing frustration at the pace of information. Police repeated that identification takes time and that it was important not to make assumptions before the forensic process was complete. The Plymouth case quickly became part of a larger narrative circulating online. Posts described the skull as part of a series of bodies discovered across New England, often including unrelated cases in the count. While the discovery was real and the investigation genuine, online discussion began to treat it as a single entry in a supposed sequence tied together by a single offender. Local authorities, however, made no such claim. Their statements remained consistent. The case was open, evidence was being reviewed, and no conclusion about foul play or linkage to other deaths could be drawn yet. For investigators, cases of skeletal remains pose unique challenges. Unlike recent deaths where there may be soft tissue, clothing, or fresh evidence, a skull alone may reveal limited information. Determining cause of death can be extremely difficult without other bones or contextual evidence from the site. Investigators typically document soil conditions, plant growth, and any possible disturbance to the area. They also look for items such as jewelry, footwear, or fragments of clothing that may help identify the person. These steps take weeks or months to process. The Plymouth discovery was treated as a high-priority matter within the county, but it was not released with sensational language. Officials emphasized professionalism and restraint. The district attorney's office noted that once the medical examiner reached conclusions about the skull, a public statement would be made. Until then, the only confirmed truth was that human remains had been found and were under analysis. This case also illustrates why caution is necessary when multiple incidents occur in a short period of time. Each discovery has its own timeline, its own forensic work, and its own investigative path. The Plymouth skull may eventually be linked to a long-missing individual, or it may remain an unsolved mystery. But grouping it automatically with other events without evidence risks confusing the public and potentially interfering with the work of detectives and examiners. The Plymouth case, as of mid-2025, remains under review. Families of the missing continue to wait for answers, and investigators continue to process evidence. What is certain is that a human skull was found in March, that it was turned over to the medical examiner, and that further details will depend on scientific identification. The Connecticut River case, Mary Colasanto. On April 27, 2025, police in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, responded to a report of a body near the Connecticut River. The area is bordered by wooded patches and water access points used by boaters and walkers. Initial details released by authorities were limited. The site was secured and recovery operations began. By April 30th, officials confirmed that the remains belonged to 72-year-old Mary Colasanto, a resident who had been reported missing several weeks earlier. Mary Colasanto was last seen in March. Family members and neighbors had raised concerns when she did not return home or make contact. A missing person investigation was opened, and search efforts included both community outreach and police resources. For weeks, her disappearance remained unresolved. The discovery in late April brought that search to an end. The location where her body was found was along a stretch of the Connecticut River that runs between Rocky Hill and Glastonbury. This area has long been a corridor where police recover items lost to the water, but bodies are less common. When remains are found in rivers, investigators consider several factors, including whether the person may have accidentally fallen in, whether there was a medical emergency near the water, or whether foul play was involved. The flow of the river itself can complicate matters, as currents move objects downstream and can deposit remains in areas far from where an incident originally occurred. Police released a statement acknowledging the identification. The message was brief, noting only that Colasanto's remains were located, that the family had been informed, and that the investigation was ongoing. No cause of death was announced in those first reports. Instead, the case was transferred to the medical examiner, who would need to perform a full autopsy, toxicology testing, and forensic examination before determining whether her death was accidental, natural, or criminal in nature. For the family, the discovery ended weeks of uncertainty. While devastating, it provided confirmation after a period of not knowing. The family requested privacy and asked the community to respect their grief. For neighbors and local residents, the recovery sparked discussion about safety along the riverbank and the importance of reporting suspicious activity or missing persons quickly. From an investigative standpoint, cases like this often involve reconstructing the timeline of a person's last known movements. Detectives look at where Colasanto was last seen, what route she might have taken, and whether she had health issues or patterns of walking near the river. Interviews with family, friends, and community members help piece together her final days. At the same time, forensic specialists examine the condition of the remains. They look for visible trauma, signs of drowning, or medical conditions that could have contributed. Clothing, footwear, and any items found with the body are cataloged carefully. All of this information builds toward the official ruling by the medical examiner. When the Colasanto case was discussed online, it was quickly grouped into a larger set of regional discoveries. Posts framed her death as another entry in a supposed series of victims linked to a serial offender. However, official records made clear that her case involved a specific missing person who had been identified and whose death was being investigated in its own right. No evidence was presented to suggest her death was related to other events in Massachusetts or Maine. Authorities emphasized that cases like Colasanto's must be understood in their individual context. Each missing person report is unique, and each recovery follows its own investigative path. The presence of multiple deaths in one region over several months does not automatically establish a connection. Investigators must base conclusions on evidence, not on public perception or social media speculation. By late April, the only confirmed facts were that Mary Colasanto had gone missing in March, that her body was found in the Connecticut River on April 27th, and that identification was completed by April 30th. Further determinations awaited autopsy results. Law enforcement reiterated that speculation about causes or links to other cases was premature. The Colasanto case shows how difficult it can be for families when social media creates a larger narrative around an individual's loss. For those who knew her, the story is not about rumors of a serial killer. It is about a 72-year-old woman who went missing and was later found. Investigators will continue their work until they can explain what happened, but their statements remain rooted in caution and fact. The Milton case. Adriana Suazo. On June 1, 2025, the body of 21-year-old Adriana Suazo was found in a wooded strip off Central Avenue in Milton, Massachusetts. The discovery was made during daylight hours, and police were called to the scene immediately. Officers arrived, secured the area, and began standard procedures for processing an unattended death. Early statements from the Norfolk District Attorney OS office confirmed that Suazo had been located in the woods and that there were no obvious signs of trauma at the scene. Investigators explained that the absence of visible injury did not determine cause of death. They emphasized that the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner would perform a full autopsy to establish both cause and manner. Until those results were available, no conclusions could be made about what happened to her. Suazo was a young woman with ties to the community. In the aftermath of her death, family members and friends organized efforts to cover funeral expenses and to raise awareness about her life. They described her as a caring individual with plans and goals for the future. The suddenness of her death left her loved ones with unanswered questions and a deep need for clarity. Milton Police, along with the district attorney's office, worked with the medical examiner to gather information. Investigators photographed the area, documented the position of the body, and looked for items that might assist in understanding the circumstances. Standard steps included searching for personal belongings, identifying whether her phone or other devices were present, and canvassing the area for witnesses. The location where she was found is a transitional zone. Not a remote forest, but not heavily populated either. It lies between residential streets and transit lines. Because of that, investigators considered multiple possibilities. A person could have collapsed from a medical emergency, could have been placed there after death elsewhere, or could have died from causes not visible externally. Toxicology, microscopic tissue study, and further examination would be required to answer those questions. News of Suazo's death spread quickly online. Within hours, posts connected her case to other discoveries across Massachusetts and Connecticut. Lists circulated claiming that she was victim number 11 or victim number 12 in a supposed sequence. These lists included deaths of differing ages, circumstances, and outcomes, yet they were presented as evidence of a serial predator. Families of the deceased, including Suazo's, faced not only grief but also waves of speculation that sometimes overshadowed the facts. Law enforcement addressed these claims directly. The Massachusetts State Police repeated that there was no evidence linking Suazo's death to any other case. They stressed that each investigation was proceeding independently and that the public should await official updates from the medical examiner rather than drawing conclusions from incomplete information. Criminologists at local universities echoed that statement, explaining that while the proximity of several deaths in time can create the perception of a pattern, professionals must rely on verifiable connections, such as DNA, ballistics, or matching methods of operation. Forensic work on unattended deaths follows a standard protocol. The medical examiner begins with a full external examination, looking for bruises, marks, or other indicators not obvious at the scene. This is followed by an internal autopsy, toxicology testing, and sometimes consultations with specialists in cardiology, neurology, or pathology if health issues are suspected. In younger individuals, toxicology often provides key answers, since drug interactions, environmental exposures, or unknown medical conditions can contribute to sudden collapse. None of these findings are immediate. Results can take weeks, and investigators rarely provide updates until the process is complete. In Suazo's case, friends and community members organized vigils and online fundraisers to support her family. These events underscored the human impact beyond the headlines. People who knew her remembered her life, not only the circumstances of her death. For them, accuracy mattered. They asked that her name not be used to promote unverified theories and that the focus remain on understanding what truly happened. The Milton case illustrates how quickly a single local tragedy can be absorbed into a larger online narrative. Within days of her death, posts framed Suazo's case as proof of a roaming killer, despite no evidence pointing to that conclusion. Officials working the case repeated that speculation harms investigations, misleads the public, and risks distracting from the actual work of determining cause and manner. As of mid-2025, the official record states that 21-year-old Adriana Suazo was found on June 1st in a wooded area off Central Avenue in Milton, Massachusetts. No visible trauma was present at the scene. Her case was placed in the care of the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for further review. The District Attorney's Office and Milton Police continue to follow up on leads and await forensic results. Until those results are returned, the circumstances of her death remain undetermined. What is certain is that Suazo's death is treated seriously by authorities and mourned deeply by her family and friends. Beyond that, conclusions await scientific evidence. The speculation that grouped her case with other deaths does not align with the facts released by officials. For responsible coverage, the focus stays on what is verifiable: the date, the location, the recovery, and the ongoing forensic process. The Revere Beach rumor incident. On August 12, 2025, Revere Beach in Massachusetts became the center of public attention after reports circulated that a body had been discovered on the shoreline. Local news outlets confirmed that emergency crews responded quickly to the scene, and large sections of the beach were cordoned off while divers entered the water. Word spread almost immediately online, and posts described the event as the latest in a series of mysterious deaths across New England. Within hours, the truth emerged. The supposed body was a rolled-up blanket. Police announced that no human remains had been found. The incident highlighted how quickly a rumor could grow into a full-scale story before facts were confirmed. Even after the correction was issued, some posts continued to describe the beach search as evidence of another victim in a supposed serial case. The events at Revere Beach showed how social media and rumor cycles can outpace reality. Visitors at the beach saw divers and police tape and shared their assumptions online. Those posts were then repeated and reframed by others, often with language suggesting confirmation. In a matter of minutes, speculation became presented as fact, and the number of supposed victims in New England's serial killer narrative increased once again. From the standpoint of police, the incident was routine. When reports of a possible body surface, responders are required to treat them seriously until verified. Divers were deployed, and standard procedures were followed. Once the item was recovered and identified as a blanket, the matter was closed. Officials clarified that no crime scene existed and that no evidence linked the incident to any other investigation. The public response, however, demonstrated the challenges faced by law enforcement in an era of instant information. Even when corrections are issued, the initial story often spreads farther than the clarification. For families of real victims, this can be frustrating and painful, as the conversation shifts from their loved ones to rumors that have no basis, in fact. In the broader narrative of 2025, the Revere Beach incident became an example of how fear was amplified without cause. It underscored the importance of waiting for official statements before drawing conclusions. It also showed why criminologists and investigators repeatedly urged caution in connecting separate cases without evidence. The official record of the event is simple. On August 12th, emergency responders investigated reports of a body at Revere Beach. Divers searched the area, recovered a rolled-up blanket, and confirmed that no human remains were present. No crime was committed, and no death occurred. For coverage that aims to be accurate, the lesson is straightforward. Not every police presence signals a homicide, and not every rumor deserves to be counted as fact. The Revere Beach incident remains a reminder of how speculation can mislead the public and inflate fear, especially when multiple real cases are already under investigation in the region. Union, Maine, the Sunshine Stewart case. On July 3, 2025, 48-year-old Sunshine Sonny Stewart was found dead at Crawford Pond in Union, Maine. The case was immediately classified as a homicide. Within days, authorities confirmed that a 17-year-old suspect had been arrested and charged with her murder. The Stewart case differs from other incidents discussed earlier because it was identified as a criminal matter from the outset. Police had direct evidence pointing to foul play, and the suspect was quickly taken into custody. This was not a case of uncertain cause, nor was it pending autopsy for clarification. It was treated as an active homicide investigation with a named victim and a defendant facing charges. Reports from the Knox County Sheriff's Office described Stewart as a well-known community member. She lived locally, had family ties in the region, and was recognized by many who used the pond for recreation. Her death shocked residents who were accustomed to viewing the area as a safe gathering place. Vigils were held in her memory, and her name appeared in tributes across social media from friends and community groups. The juvenile charged in the case was not publicly named because of age. Maine law restricts the release of identifying information for minors facing criminal proceedings. Officials confirmed, however, that the individual was charged with murder and that the case would proceed through the court system. The district attorney's office announced that it would evaluate whether to petition for the defendant to be tried as an adult, a decision that requires legal review and judicial approval. Unlike the Plymouth, Connecticut, or Milton cases, the Stewart homicide involved an immediate law enforcement response supported by clear investigative findings. There was no ambiguity about whether a crime had occurred. Statements from police, prosecutors, and family members made clear that Stewart was the victim of an act of violence and that accountability was being sought through the judicial process. Despite these facts, the Stewart case was frequently grouped into online lists of supposed serial victims across New England. Posts described her as another entry in a series, sometimes with misleading language suggesting that her killer remained unidentified. In reality, authorities had already arrested a suspect. The inclusion of her case in serial killer narratives demonstrates how misinformation spreads when complex local events are oversimplified into broad claims. For Stewart's family, the focus was not on rumor, but on justice. Community members rallied to provide support, and legal observers emphasized that the trial process would take time. The juvenile system in Maine requires evaluations, hearings, and motions before the full details of prosecution are determined. In the meantime, the sheriff's office and prosecutors remained committed to pursuing accountability for her death. From an investigative perspective, the Stewart homicide illustrates the contrast between confirmed criminal acts and deaths pending determination. When a suspect is identified and arrested, investigators can release specific information about charges, court dates, and the nature of the offense. When a case is still under medical review, details remain limited and conclusions are withheld until examiners complete their work. This difference is critical in separating genuine homicide cases from situations where cause of death is not yet known. The Stewart case also underscores the human dimension behind the headlines. Friends and neighbors described her as generous, optimistic, and deeply connected to those around her. Vigils at Crawford Pond included candles, music, and stories about her life. Coverage in local newspapers highlighted her role in the community rather than focusing solely on the crime. For many, remembering who she was mattered as much as following the progress of the legal case. As of mid-2025, the official record is clear. Sunshine. Sonny Stewart, age 48, was killed in Union, Maine on July 3rd. A 17-year-old suspect has been arrested and charged with murder. The case is active in the court system, and prosecutors are considering further motions regarding trial status. Law enforcement has not linked her death to any other case in Massachusetts, Connecticut, or elsewhere. The Stewart homicide is a reminder that while multiple deaths may occur in a region within a short time frame, each must be understood individually. Some involve unattended deaths with causes not yet determined. Others, like Stewart's, are confirmed crimes with identified suspects. Treating them all as part of a single narrative erases critical differences and misrepresents the facts. Why police? Reject the serial killer theory. Throughout the spring and summer of 2025, law enforcement officials in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Maine were repeatedly asked whether the deaths and recoveries across the region pointed to the presence of a serial killer. Their answer remained the same. There was no evidence to support that claim. Investigators explained that determining whether deaths are linked requires specific forms of evidence. These include forensic matches, similarities in victim profiles, consistent methods of killing, or other indicators that connect cases beyond coincidence. In the New England cases, those elements were not present. Victims varied widely in age, location, and circumstances. Some deaths were classified as unattended and pending autopsy. One was a confirmed homicide with an arrested suspect. Others involved skeletal remains requiring months of forensic analysis before any conclusions could be reached. The Massachusetts State Police addressed the issue publicly. The agency stated that while investigators monitor and track developments closely, no data indicated that a single offender was responsible for multiple cases. This position was echoed by district attorney offices handling individual investigations. Each office emphasized that its responsibility was to evaluate the facts of its own case, not to merge separate incidents into a broader narrative without proof. Criminologists also commented on the situation. James Allen Fox, a professor at Northeastern University and a widely recognized expert on serial homicide, explained that while several deaths occurring in one region within a short time frame may create the perception of a pattern, perception is not the same as evidence. He noted that without concrete links such as DNA, ballistics, or a consistent method of operation, investigators cannot responsibly declare a serial offender at work. The differences between cases underscored the point. In Plymouth, a skull was found in the woods with no immediate context. In Connecticut, Mary Colasanto was identified after being recovered from a river where natural causes, accident, or foul play were all possibilities. In Milton, Adriana Suazo was located with no visible trauma, and her case required toxicology and further medical analysis. At Revere Beach, the incident turned out to be a blanket mistaken for a body. In Union, Maine, a suspect was already arrested for the confirmed murder of Sunshine Stewart. Officials highlighted these distinctions to show why grouping the incidents together was misleading. A series of deaths caused by one offender would typically involve shared characteristics. In these cases, the facts did not align. The presence of different investigative outcomes demonstrated that the theory of a serial killer was not supported. Police also stressed the risks created by speculation. Public fear can lead to the spread of misinformation, which complicates investigations. When people believe a serial killer is operating, they may withhold useful information out of fear, or they may provide false leads driven by rumor rather than fact. Families of victims are also affected, as their loved ones' names become attached to narratives that do not reflect the reality of their cases. Investigators noted that their work must remain evidence-based. Every case has to be processed according to its own merits, with reliance on forensic testing, witness statements, and medical examinations. Until those processes are complete, speculation is unhelpful and potentially harmful. That is why law enforcement consistently responded to questions by reaffirming that no connections had been established. The official position remains clear. As of mid-2025, authorities in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Maine have found no evidence linking the deaths and discoveries across the region to a single offender. Some cases are still pending examination, others are resolved through identification, and one is an active homicide with an arrested suspect. The claim of a serial killer remains unsupported by facts. How rumors and social media amplify fear. As the spring and summer cases in New England unfolded, online discussion quickly shaped the public's perception. Posts on platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit grouped the events into a single narrative, often with headlines claiming that 13 bodies had been discovered and that a serial killer was active in the region. These claims spread faster than official statements, creating a cycle in which rumor overshadowed fact. One reason this happened is the speed of digital communication. When police secure a scene, images of tape, cruisers, and investigators often appear online before any verified information is released. Viewers make assumptions, attach them to broader stories, and share them widely. By the time corrections arrive, the first version has already reached a much larger audience. The Revere Beach incident illustrated this clearly. What began as a rumor about a body turned out to be a blanket, but the correction did not travel as far as the initial claim. Another factor is confirmation bias. People naturally look for patterns, especially when stories involve tragedy or uncertainty. When multiple deaths occurred within a short period, users began to connect them even though investigators had not. Posts displayed collages of victim photos, maps with pins across Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Maine, and running tallies that suggested the region was in danger. Each new case was added automatically, regardless of its actual circumstances. This process has consequences for investigations. Families of the deceased see their loved ones' names and photos attached to speculative lists. Law enforcement must respond to waves of calls and questions that draw resources away from actual casework. In some instances, misinformation can even create false leads, as individuals report suspicions based not on direct evidence, but on what they have read online. Experts in criminology point out that rumor cycles thrive when official information is limited. Investigations often require weeks or months before autopsy, toxicology, and forensic testing are complete. During that time, speculation fills the gap. The result is that perception of a serial case grows stronger in the absence of confirmed details, even when authorities state otherwise. For communities, the effect is heightened anxiety. Residents of towns like Plymouth, Milton, and Rocky Hill reported concerns about safety despite no evidence of an ongoing threat. Local police departments issued reminders that speculation harms both the public and families. They asked people to wait for official updates and to share only information that comes directly from investigators or district attorney offices. The New England cases demonstrate how online rumor can turn separate incidents into a single story without evidence. The amplification of fear does not reflect reality, but it does shape public conversation. For responsible coverage, the lesson is clear. Focus on verified facts, avoid counting cases together without proof, and recognize the human cost of misinformation. Closing summary and call for responsible awareness. Between March and August 2025, several separate cases unfolded across New England. Each case involved different circumstances, different individuals, and different investigative outcomes. On March 6th, a skull was discovered near Route 3 in Plymouth, Massachusetts. On April 27th, the body of 72-year-old Mary Colasanto was recovered from the Connecticut River and identified by April 30th. On June 1st, 21-year-old Adriana Suazo was found in a wooded area off Central Avenue in Milton. On August 12th, police responded to reports of a body at Revere Beach, which turned out to be a rolled-up blanket. On July 3rd, 48-year-old Sunshine Stewart was killed in Union, Maine, and a 17-year-old suspect was arrested and charged with her murder. When viewed individually, these cases show different paths. The Plymouth discovery remains under forensic review. The Colasanto case is an identified missing person with cause of death pending autopsy. The Suazo case is under medical examination, with investigators awaiting toxicology and further results. The Revere Beach incident was a false alarm with no body and no crime. The Stewart homicide is a confirmed criminal act with an arrested suspect moving through the judicial process. Despite these differences, online discussions tied them together under the label of a serial killer. Posts claimed that as many as 13 bodies had been found across New England, creating fear that a single offender was targeting people across multiple states. Law enforcement consistently rejected these claims, emphasizing that no evidence connected the cases. Criminologists explained that similarities in timing and geography are not enough to prove a serial pattern. Investigators must rely on forensic data, victimology, and methods of operation, none of which matched across the events. For families of the deceased, the spread of rumor compounded grief. Loved ones were remembered as individuals, yet their names were often grouped into lists without context. Officials reminded the public that speculation harms families and can interfere with investigations. Police asked that attention remain on factual updates from authorities and on the human reality of each case, rather than on unverified narratives. The lessons from these months are straightforward. First, multiple deaths in one region do not automatically mean a single offender is responsible. Second, rumors and assumptions online can distort facts and increase fear. Third, investigators must be allowed the time required for autopsy, toxicology, and forensic review before conclusions are drawn. Fourth, families deserve accurate representation of their loved ones' cases, free from speculation that obscures the truth. As of mid-2025, the official record shows no serial killer operating across New England. Instead, there are individual cases, each requiring its own careful investigation. The Plymouth skull awaits identification. The Colasanto case is under autopsy review. The Suazo case depends on medical findings. The Revere Beach rumor was corrected within hours. The Stewart homicide is moving forward in court. For viewers, the responsible response is to follow verified information, to avoid repeating unconfirmed claims, and to respect the families affected. Each case deserves recognition in its own right. The truth may not match the dramatic stories that circulate online, but the truth honors the people whose lives were lost and supports the investigators working toward answers.